Recording.
All right.
I'm gonna give the date.
Is that recording? It should be
The
flashing.
date is, what is it? January 1st, 2011. We're going to ask some questions of Steve and Carlene. First question. When did your mom and dad become Christians?
These are all directed to me.
Yeah, that's for you.
Probably within the decade of the 1940s.
1940s?
Yeah.
What caused them to become a Christian?
Well, my dad specifically, my youngest sister died, and that was his favorite, and he was brokenhearted, and he really was tender at that point, and kind of the church that my wife or my mother was attending kind of wooed him in, and the pastors, asked him enough questions, and I think my dad became a Christian because of that.
So Grandma went to church before Grandpa?
Well, I think my mother became a Christian before my dad did.
And how did she start going to church?
Uncle Louis and her mother, Grandma Babbage, were the first in our family to become Christians.
Uncle George.
Uncle George, I'm sorry, I meant George, not Louis.
All right. Okay. So your father was from Russia or Ukraine, and your grandmother, where was she from? Or your mother?
Grandma's from Hungary. They moved to Canada, and my mother was born in Hamilton, Ontario.
So how did they meet?
My parents?
Yeah.
My dad went to New York and became a chef in a hotel. Then he was in the food business, moved to the Detroit area, Mount Clemens area, and my mother's from Mount Clemens. The exact how they met, I don't know, but the point is that's what got him into Michigan.
Interesting. So he was in the food business. He opened a grocery store. Where was his first store at? Was it Hazel Park or something?
That's where I was born, in Hazel Park, and that's the earliest I know of him having a store. My mother worked for A&P for years, so she was also in the food business for a while.
Okay.
How the connection came about, I'm not sure.
And then they moved to Dryden at some point.
Well, no, we moved to Royal Oak as far as our resident was.
Okay.
Then they sold that business, and then they moved to Dryden and opened a grocery store.
So you talked about many times about growing up in the store. What was that like?
Well, as a kid, it was fun because we had all kinds of food to eat and and so forth. But it was not good for a family life. And
Why do you say that?
well, because we didn't have a normal life. My parents were always tired. At the end of the day, being that they were all older, they went to bed real early at night. And so us kids, we didn't have much of a family life.
Wow. Okay. All right. How did you meet Carlene?
My sister Irene married her husband Don, and they were working for a funeral home in Rochester, Michigan. And they started attending a church. And one day my sister said, "You need to meet this girl." And
Was there anything about this girl that she mentioned?
well, she said I would probably like her. Her father was a minister, and our very first acquaintance.
And she has what?
She had nice teeth.
That's what she told me.
I was probing him.
He was trying to get that out of you.
So what church was this? She came to your church in...
No, Don and Irene were music directors at the First Church of the Nazarene in Rochester, Michigan.
Uh-huh.
And of course, I went and lived with them because I attended Michigan or Oakland University that fall. By living with them, obviously, I was right there.
What year was that?
1960.
1960.
And is this Grandpa Book's church? Was
No,
he the pastor?
He wasn't the pastor, but he was a pastor. But they were attending theirs too. The Book family was attending that same church.
Grandpa Book had resigned from the church he was pastoring outside of Rochester, and then we were attending the Rochester church.
So anyway, he said, "You want to meet her?" So even though I wasn't attending that church myself, I did go one particular Sunday, and her parents invited us and the pastor over for dinner. And so that was the Sunday that we really got to meet, but it was kind of odd because even though I knew she would be in church, I didn't realize I went to Sunday school, and I sat down in the front row, And either you came in after me or I came in after you. What was it?
I don't remember.
Anyway, so we sat right next to each other.
Interesting.
And I knew who she was, obviously. She knew I was. It was kind of awkward. We're sitting there and kind of looking at each other like this. And
So then
Anyway,
how did you get engaged? When did you get engaged?
2 years later, 1962, in the spring, after dating for almost 2 years,
Interesting.
when I gave her a ring and asked her, that's how we got engaged.
Wow. All right. Then what happened? You got married, right?
Got married that fall.
Where'd you get married at?
In Armada, at the former parsonage of the Assembly of God Church.
So in between this time, from when you met at the Nazarene Church, you switched over to the Armada Church?
I was going to the Assembly Church without fail, except I would visit occasionally the church that Carlene was attending. And we would sing once in a while, because Don and Irene and I kind of sang together. But little by little, Carlene would come with me, and so basically we were attending the Assembly of God Church in Armada.
Is that right, Carlene?
Yes. The time we met, we were actually having revival services at the church, and because Don and Irene were working with the music, and the three of them sang together, he came to sing with them for the services.
For the duration of the services.
Yeah. Well, you were there for the Sunday,
Yeah.
and then throughout the week. So, otherwise, he was always at Armada,
At the Assembly Church.
at the assembly.
So you got married. Carlene? What did your mom and dad say when you told them you got married?
Well,
What is going on?
Keep that thing rolling.
actually, I was in nursing school, and we had decided to get married. It was against the rules to get married the first year of training, and we were going to get married and keep it a secret, and then at the end of the year, go ahead and have a church wedding and everything, so that the school wouldn't get wind of it, because some of the students had actually gotten expelled, even like a year after the fact, when they found out they had gotten married before they were supposed to. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I called my mother on Monday after we had gotten married on Friday night, and told her that we had gotten married. And evidently she was standing on a stool or something or other, fixing curtains, and almost fell off. And she's like, "What? I don't believe this. I don't believe this."
An interesting side note in this was that we had planned on getting married in the Assembly of God Church, in the church itself, on a Friday night. Now remember, we told nobody except we had to have 2 witnesses. The pastor's wife was a witness, and my sister Irene was a witness.
Oh, she was? She was at the
Yeah.
wedding?
And
I
she was
never
one
knew
of the
that.
witnesses. We had to have 2 witnesses. And Irene, by that time, was about 9 months
And a
expecting with Donnie.
'Cause he was,
So here we drove over to Armada, and the pastor, we were going to go in and get married in the church. So we get there, and the one family's cleaning the church. Well, we didn't want them in on it, so we pulled on the side street, and we thought we'd wait them out. And we couldn't wait them out. So finally, the pastor went in there to find out how long it was going to be, and he came back to our car. Remember, we're down the side street. Here we were dressed in our suits, and he's dressed up. And he says, "It looks like they are not going to be done in a while. Do you want to get married in the parsonage?" So we drove out of town about 5 miles, and we got married in the parsonage that night.
Interesting.
and the thing is, it was already getting dark, and their children were home, and some of them were already ready for bed. And because this was supposed to be a secret, they made their kids get dressed and go outside and play, so that we could get married in the house.
Interesting.
So Don and Irene were there, or just Irene?
Just Irene.
Just Irene.
But she did tell Don,
Yeah, she told him, because
because
obviously,
Donnie was born a week after we were married. So if he had called home and didn't get any answer, this was before cell phones, and he would have been worried. So she had to let him know where she was going. Other than that, we didn't tell anybody.
So that was 1962.
62 in October.
And then when was John born? John, your son.
In April of 64.
And then Cindy
In February of 67.
and Rhonda.
In January of 71.
Any stories about these young kids? You remember anything about that time?
John, Carlene was a long time in labor because I guess that's usually the case in your first. So I dropped her off at the hospital and I went to work. And then it was all day long, and
And he came back, and I was still there.
She was there. She was there that night, still laboring. So I was there when he was born.
You were there.
Yeah. Cindy's birth, it was bitter cold. I remember it was one of the coldest winters, and she was married or buried. Buried. Wow. Born in Lansing, Michigan, and I remember.
Yale, Michigan.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, that was Rhonda. She was born in Yale, Michigan. And again, it was very, very cold and bitter. So anyway, I was working on the house. And again, I dropped her off. And I came home and I was working on the house. And I went back later that day and
The baby was already born.
yeah, I missed the birth on that one.
All right. And then Rhonda, where is she born?
She was born in Lansing.
Lansing and Michigan State, right?
Yeah.
In Lansing.
We were living.
We'd already.
I was going to college. Or no, I was teaching. Yeah, I was teaching.
You were already teaching.
Where were you living when John was born?
In
In the Washington Trailer Park. In a little trailer. 8x35 trailer. That was our house.
All right. I remember.
And Cindy was born in that same trailer, but we had just finished our house, or we were building, and we were able to move in just a couple weeks later.
a couple weeks after she was born.
Wow. All right. So you got 3 kids. It's 1971, right? Something like that.
Right.
Then, in 1974, I think you go to Australia. Talk about Australia.